Book 1, The Blazing Ronin, Wandering Blades. Chapter 19, The Protégé's Vengeful Return. Akira led his Blazing Vanguard deeper into the shadowed valley, his emerald katana held at the ready. They had been following the winding path set forth by the Emerald Trail for several days now, deciphering the Old One's ancient prophecies about the Defiler's inevitable return. The Ronin's mind was still reeling from the revelations that had unfolded. That they were being offered the chance to transcend the limits of this existence, to be unmade and reforged in the fires of oblivion as living embodiments of the Old One's limitless power. It was, unfathomable, the path of spiritual rebirth laid out before them. And yet, Akira could not deny the truth burning in the sentient Saranakusari's words. If he and his warriors were to have any hope of combating the Defiler, of cutting through that ancient primordial evil's insatiable hunger, then they would need abilities far beyond those of mere mortals. As if summoned by his doubts, a strange presence seemed to materialize beside the Ronin. Akira tensed, his katana angling forward as he turned to face the potential threat, only to find himself staring into a pair of achingly familiar eyes. Ren. The young warrior breathed, his deep voice tinged with a mixture of shock and trepidation. It cannot be. The figure slowly stepped forward into a shaft of pale moonlight, revealing the unmistakable features of Ren Takeda. Akira's former protégé, the young warrior he had taken under his wing all those years ago after the Emerald Cataclysm that decimated his lord's army. Ren regarded the Ronin impassively for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he spoke in that same quiet, measured tone Akira remembered so well. "Hello, my former master. It has been quite some time since we last looked upon one another, has it not?" The young warrior's eyes seemed to burn from within as he leveled his intense stare at Akira, his next words practically dripping with contempt. "Tell me, do you even remember the depths of your betrayal that night? The tragedy you condemned me to with your arrogance and weakness?" A shocked silence fell over the valley as the weight of Ren's words seemed to linger in the air like a suffocating miasma. Akira could only stare at his former protégé in stunned disbelief, his mind struggling to process the undercurrent of hatred and barely restrained fury radiating from the young warrior. Finally, the Ronin found his voice, his deep baritone laced with a mixture of intensity and trepidation. "Ren, what is this madness you speak of? Some lingering resentment or delusion that has finally driven you over the edge?" Akira's markings flared briefly with ethereal energy as he leveled his piercing emerald stare at his former student, holding Ren's gaze steadily. "You were my most devoted protégé, the finest warrior I had the honor of tutoring in the years after the cataclysm. We walked the path of the blazing Ronin together, you and I, in those dark days of sorrow and regret." The young warrior opened his mouth to continue when Ren suddenly lashed out, his hand blurring in a vicious arc. Akira's eyes widened as a series of shurikens slashed through the air towards him, the razor-edged projectiles shimmering with ethereal energy of their own. The Ronin deflected the attack almost contemptuously, his emerald katana blurring into a prismatic whirl of motion as he batted the shuriken aside with deft sweeps. But Ren did not let up, launching himself forward in a burst of incredible speed. Akira backpedaled rapidly, angling his blade to receive the young warrior's furious onslaught. Their swords clashed together in a blinding series of strikes and parries, the air itself seeming to shudder with the forces being unleashed. "You were never worthy of being my master, Akira," Ren shouted over the din of clashing blades, his eyes burning with fury. "You were a pathetic, deluded shell of a warrior after the cataclysm, clinging to outdated notions of honor and balance." The young warrior redoubled his furious assault, his notaki becoming a whirling dervish of flashing steel that drove the Ronin back further and further. "And in your arrogance, in your weakness, you condemned us all to tragedy that night? You are the reason my family, my entire clan was slaughtered before my eyes." Ren seemed to swell with unbridled rage, his entire body trembling as his markings flared with blinding crimson light. With a thunderous shout, the young warrior launched himself into a blindingly fast series of strikes, his notaki's blade leaving crimson contrails in its wake. Akira grunted in exertion, struggling to keep Ren's furious onslaught at bay through a combination of desperate parries and sheer agility. A hairline cut opened along his cheek as one strike slipped through his defenses, quickly followed by another scoring a burning line across his sword arm. The Ronin hissed in pain and surprise, faltering for a split second as his former protégé's relentless assault drove him further and further back. Finally, Akira broke off completely, backflipping away to put distance between them as he panted for breath. "You've clearly allowed some delusion to take root within you, Ren," the warrior rumbled, his deep voice tinged with quiet intensity. "I did everything in my power to save as many lives as possible that night, including your clan's. Their slaughter was an unavoidable tragedy, one I have carried the weight of ever since." Ren seemed to tremble with barely restrained fury at his former master's words, his crimson markings flaring ever brighter as his grip tightened around his nodaki's hilt. "Lies," he hissed through gritted teeth. "You speak nothing but lies, Akira. I witnessed your weakness firsthand that night, your failure to act when it mattered most. And for that, my family paid the ultimate price." The young warrior leveled his blade at the Ronin, his eyes burning like twin suns from within. "Which is why I have spent every day since that tragedy dedicating myself to a new purpose, to walk my own path, one free from your deluded teachings and outdated notions of honor. A path that will allow me to grow powerful enough to cut you down where you stand, to end your pathetic existence once and for all." Ren's markings flared with blinding crimson light once more as he seemed to swell with power, the very air around them becoming suffused with his unbridled rage and hatred. Akira could only watch in stunned silence as the young warrior's form seemed to shift, his body and spirit becoming intertwined with those same searing energies. This is the power I have embraced in your absence, Master," Ren spat, his voice taking on a strange reverberating quality that set the Ronin's teeth on edge. "The limitless truth that you were too blinded by your own arrogance and weakness to fully comprehend." The young warrior leveled his nodaki at Akira, his next words carrying the unmistakable weight of conviction. "I am no longer a deluded insect clinging to outdated notions as you are, Akira. I have transcended the limits of this existence, allowed my mortal shell to be unmade and reforged as a living embodiment of oblivion's power." Ren's crimson markings flared ever brighter, bathing the valley in blinding scarlet light. Akira could only stare at his former protégé in stunned silence, his mind struggling to process the sheer enormity of the young warrior's words. He had undergone the same spiritual transcendence that the sentient Saranakusari had offered. Allowed his mortal form to be unmade and reforged in the fires of oblivion as a living embodiment of the Old One's limitless energies. It seemed impossible, unfathomable even for one who had witnessed those cosmic forces firsthand. And yet, the Ronin could not deny the truth burning in Ren's words, the intensity of his convictions. His former protégé had clearly embraced a new path, one that ran completely contrary to Akira's own teachings and values. A path of oblivion and unfettered power, one that seemed to be fueled by an all-consuming hatred for his former master. The young warrior's eyes blazed like twin suns from within as he leveled his crimson nodaki at Akira, his next words seeming to resonate through the Ronin's very being. "I have been reborn as a living instrument of the infinite truth, Master. Reforged in the fires of oblivion itself, my mortal shell elevated to a state of existence you could scarcely begin to comprehend." Ren slowly extended his hand, tendrils of searing crimson energy lashing outwards to encircle Akira in a blazing ring. The Ronin cried out in shock and pain, his robes smoldering from the intense heat as he was forced to his knees. "And now, you will bear witness to the true extent of my power," the young warrior intoned, his voice resonating with lethal intensity. "You will understand the grave error you committed in betraying me all those years ago, in allowing your weakness to condemn my family to slaughter." As Ren's words rang out, the crimson flame surrounding Akira flared ever brighter. The Ronin threw back his head, a scream of anguish tearing from his throat as his body began to disintegrate, consumed by the searing scarlet fire. Akira could only watch in stunned silence as his former protégé extended his influence, the rest of the vanguard rapidly becoming encircled by the same blazing rings of crimson energy. Kaya, Kozue, Masaru, and Hana, the kunoichi assassin's eyes burning from within her mask as she struggled against Ren's power. No, the Ronin breathed, his voice laced with a mixture of anguish and quiet defiance. I will not allow you to perpetuate this delusion, Ren. Your path leads only to eternal emptiness and oblivion. Akira's markings flared with brilliant emerald light in response, allowing him to break free from the crimson flames as he rose to his feet once more. The young warrior watched impassively as the Ronin steadied himself, the two former master and student regarding one another across the battlefield. Finally, Ren gave a slight shake of his head, an inscrutable expression playing across his features. So be it, master, he stated flatly. If you are too blinded by your arrogance and weakness to embrace the infinite truth, then I will simply have to unmake you myself and cast your ashes into the oblivion they rightly belong. With a sweeping gesture, the young warrior conjured a massive swirling vortex of crimson smoke and shadow. Akira could only watch in stunned silence as Ren's form seemed to become consumed by the roiling tendrils, shifting and changing into something else entirely. The vortex rapidly expanded until it towered over the valley like a malevolent storm cloud, crackling with power. Slowly, a series of shapes began taking form amidst the searing energies, towering obsidian monoliths that seemed to pulse with that same insatiable, corrupted power. Akira felt his breath catch in his throat as the same runes and patterns covering his body began etching themselves across the monolith's carved surfaces. He recognized those archaic symbols instantly, could feel the ancient primordial evil they represented burning in his very soul. This was the true face of the Defiler, the insatiable force of oblivion that had first turned against the old ones in the primordial age. The same ancient entity that Lord Ito had made a pact with, one that now seemed to be granting Ren its limitless power. The visions intensified until Akira felt as if he were being overwhelmed once more. Entire celestial realms crumbling as searing tendrils of smoke and shadow consumed everything in their path, reducing it all to formless oblivion. And at the center of the cosmic maelstrom, Ren's form began taking shape. But it was different, changed in a way that made the Ronin's breath catch in his throat. The young warrior's body seemed to be composed of those same swirling tendrils of crimson smoke and shadow. His features were twisted, elongated into something almost demonic, with burning crimson eyes and a maw filled with razor-sharp obsidian fangs. Ren leveled his intense stare at Akira, his voice taking on that same strange reverberating quality as before, but deeper, more resonant, as if some ancient primordial force were speaking through him. This is the true face of my power, Blazing Ronin, the young warrior intoned, his words seeming to reverberate through Akira's very being. The limitless energies of oblivion itself, granted to me by an ancient entity far beyond anything you could possibly comprehend. Ren, or whatever he had become, slowly extended his hand. A series of archaic runes and symbols shimmered into existence, hanging in the air before them and pulsing with power. The Defiler has opened my eyes to the infinite truth, Master, the corrupted warrior continued, his voice resonating with quiet intensity. Shown me the grave error in the path of honor and redemption you tried to lead me down, one shackled by outdated notions and weakness. The runes flared brilliantly, their pulsing crimson light searing Akira's eyes as that same power and significance washed over him. The Ronin gasped, stumbling slightly as his markings burned with ethereal energy in response. I have transcended such limitations, Akira. Ren's voice seemed to echo from everywhere at once, ringing with the weight of destiny itself. Become more than a deluded insect clinging to a path that will only lead to eternal despair. I am the living truth of oblivion reborn, an instrument of the Defiler's limitless power. The visions intensified until Akira felt as if he were being overwhelmed once more. Entire realms of existence crumbling as searing tendrils of smoke and shadow consumed everything in their path, reducing it all to formless oblivion. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Ren's voice rang out one final time, resonating through the Ronin's very soul with the weight of inevitability itself. And I will not rest until you and your misguided allies have been utterly unmade before the infinite truth. Mark my words, Akira, by the time our conflict reaches its conclusion, there will be nothing left of you or your pathetic vanguard but ashes drifting amongst the oblivion. Akira could only stare at his former protege in stunned silence, his mind struggling to fully comprehend the path Ren had embraced. He had truly transcended the limits of this existence, allowed his mortal shell to be unmade and reforged as a living embodiment of the Defiler's limitless power. The young warrior's hatred and resentment had driven him to make a pact with that same ancient primordial evil, granting him abilities that could potentially unmake all of creation. And now, he sought to cut Akira down utterly, to reduce the Ronin and his Blazing Vanguard to formless oblivion in his quest for vengeance. It was unfathomable, overwhelming in its implications. And yet, the Ronin could not deny the truth burning in Ren's words, the sheer intensity of his convictions. His former protege had well and truly embraced a new path, one that ran completely contrary to Akira's own teachings and values. A path of oblivion and unfettered destruction, one that seemed to be fueled by an all-consuming hatred for his former master. And unless the Ronin could find a way to overcome the limitless power Ren had been granted,